Hi, I'm Sarah from The Upcoming. An absolute pleasure to be able to speak to you today. Maybe you could just kick off with a brief introduction to this wonderful, unique, and very original film, Moon 66 Questions.
Yeah, so it's my debut feature film, and I think it's a collage film about unspoken love.
And as mentioned, it's your first feature. How did you decide that this was the story that you wanted to put on the screen for the first time, and how did you develop it?
Usually, I don't follow a strictly conscious decision-making procedure. So I just knew I had to make that film since I knew these people that the film is inspired from. And so that was it. I knew it from many years ago. And regarding the development, it was a very long journey. I attended many screenwriters lab, and I was waiting for the funds for a very long time. So development was a very long journey, I have to say.
And obviously, it really centers around your central character, your protagonist. Casting that character was going to be so crucial. So how did you kind of discover Sofia, and how did you work? I believe it was quite a sort of collaborative process, building the character, building her backstory. So how did you find her, and how did you work with her?
Yeah, I had worked with her 2 times beforehand. We had already shot 2 short films together. And in the meanwhile, we became friends. So I knew when I was writing that Sofia would be the protagonist of my film. I think she's a really charismatic actress. I don't know if her creative force comes through due to the different language. I mean, I don't know if you can get the impact that she has, but she's great. And regarding how we work together, we have a very particular way. I refrain from rehearsing. I don't like that, at least for the moment. Therefore, I mostly wrote things about the protagonist's backstory, and we exchanged the kind of diary notes and letters. Mostly, it was more like a theoretical, if you want, approach rather than a hands-on character approach.
And in terms of the form of the film, it feels sort of quietly experimental and bold, because it doesn't follow, let's say, the kind of conventions that we're used to seeing. So how did you want to put your film together? In particular, the first section, a lot of it unfolds almost wordlessly. And so it relies very much on the visual language of the film. So how did you want to experiment with the tools that cinema gives you, but use them in a different way?
I knew ever since I decided to embark on this journey and making this film, which is thematically already rather challenging, I knew that the form and the shape of the film should fit the complexity of the topic it presents in a way. There are many films that are very nice and super entertaining and really nice to watch, and I'm a big fan. However, when the form and the shape, I feel, does not abide with the system of the film itself, there's always a small gap. And I really enjoy when I see this language in language thing. I really appreciate it, because I think this is when we really speak about cinema as an art form and not just as a plot-driven, how can I explain it? I don't mean to undermine any other type of cinema. I just believe that when, let's say, we forget about how films are being made and we see what we have in front of us and we decide to jump on the moment, something really unique comes up. So I really wanted to try out this thing, and because I had it in my head for many years, I tried to experiment in my shorts before to see if somehow the different formats would work, the different textures would work together, what would happen. And it went quite well. And in the feature film, we expanded a little bit, even with durations at some points. I mean, I'm happy for your comment, because this is still, although there's 1 year that the film is going around and I have been receiving very nice reviews and comments, at the same time, I'm always somehow scared about the fact that I made a film that in its shape, it is a bit complicated.
And tell us about the actual kind of logistics of the way you shot it, because there's something about kind of the camera angles, which again just feels like a bit unique. You're not often sort of doing a wide shot, or you definitely switch. So sometimes it feels like the camera's almost obscuring as much as it's revealing, but then you start to piece it together. I think you mentioned almost like a collage or a puzzle. So, how did that work in the actual filming of it? And how did you want that to sort of, the effect of that to be when you're watching it as a whole?
Yeah, about camera angles in particular shots, to be absolutely honest, because my priority was to be as camera crew as discreet as possible and be really close to Sofia. I was not setting up shots as I did in the past. I prefer to let it be and see what will come up and what we will catch, rather than be very specific about now let's see her eyes or her hair or her arms or whatever. So it was a much more organic thing, and I could not do it with anyone else than my cinematographer, Konstantinos Koukoulios, who has been my steady collaborator. And I think that what you talk about has to do with our communication after all these years, that somehow we kind of have the same sense of where we want to go and what we want to show at any given moment. So it gives this puzzle situation, as you mentioned.
Mm. It's also a film that seems to be one of contrasts, and almost the effect of the contrast is that it sort of puts even more importance. So, as there's a lot of silence and not much dialogue, then when she is saying something, you feel like you listen even more closely. And because there's so much tension between her and her father, then when there are moments of connection, of joy, then they even spring off the screen, or because she has to be so serious a lot of the time. When she's being playful, with the hosepipe dancing, doing her kind of make-believe moments, they stand out even more. So was that something that was a key thread for you, this thing of contrasts?
Yes, contrast is a key thread for me, not only in my filmmaking career endeavor, but my life, because I see it everywhere. I mean, I feel that if we embrace contrast in our lives and we don't resist it, things will be much simpler, because indeed, one moment is like this, the other moment is like this, the other moment is like this. This is life. I mean, the utopian situation where everything is consequent and one thing's for the doesn't exist. I mean, every moment is unique. So sure, contrast was a big part of the film actually, and contrast, if you want, in the broader context of duality, which is also a very big concept of the film. Father-daughter, secret life of the father. I mean, there are many double things in the film, so the contrast. And one of the reasons that here in the film I feel the contrast and the way it is employed works well is that it's very rare that when we see a drama film, like let's say similar premise, that writers or directors allow us to see that in these very dark hours there is some lightness. And it's not portrayed. I don't know why there is a guilt that if you're a human being, then you don't care anymore. Something complicated. So yes, it was important, and it still is important.
And you can also see the film through the lens almost of like a coming of age, and also those playful moments. You remember that she's only young, and they feel quite childlike, and also kind of those pressures that maybe that women have in general, people who are carers, young people who are made, kind of forced to grow up faster than maybe they're ready to. And it's that kind of that pressure that then sort of, builds up to these outbursts. So, how can you see it through the lens of a coming of age, perhaps?
Of course, and the way I was pitching it before was a coming of age of a relationship, because I was thinking that, yes, we have the coming of age concept for individuals. However, I think that relationships, either personal or family relationships, they're all one actually for me. They go through their own coming of age where there is true reconciliation. And when I mean true reconciliation, what is required here is to really be able to see the other as they are and to realize that part of what you see is what you want to see, so on and so forth, all these psychoanalytical things. So for sure. And I think that the film shows that at the beginning she's really much more of a child, and gradually she realizes the actual burden, and it gets heavier and heavier. And this is when somehow she finds out about her father's secret as a gift from the universe for her being there so brave and strong. So for sure, and it is a fact, I mean, in even the history of tragedy, that the biggest coming of age point of everyone is when we become the parents of our parents, in a way. So this is partially what the film suggests, I guess.
And there's also, when we're talking about kind of contrast, I was thinking as well of like the physical proximity, not necessarily equaling, emotional connection or intimacy. This moment say, oh, you're close to him, so you can let him hug you and you can feel the awkwardness and the tension. Or I thought it was a great analogy when she says like she has these VHS tapes that she can't watch, and then like he's right there in front of her, but he can't access her. So kind of what that thing of that frustrating thing that you can be close physically to someone but not close to them emotionally.
Yeah, I think this is the problem, the issue, the situation of any big city. We are very close to each other and we don't know anything about the other person, and we don't even want to know about the other person. I mean, it is a fact. And it gets much heavier when the topic revolves around people that are supposed to be close to you. Because again, it's a societal concept that the parents are close to the kids are this and that. It's all about roles, role playing, role shifting, so on and so forth. It's interesting. And here I think it's a very particular premise, the fact that the father ended up with a disease that literally made him unable to do anything on his own. So the daughter becomes his legs, the daughter becomes his arms, the daughter becomes his body without having been close emotionally. And I was wondering whether this is helping the situation. I mean, the emotional distance in a way in such a situation maybe helps the carer see the other as a patient and not as a father, because I think it would be very hard for her if she was taking care of him and she was constantly the daughter and the father. There's a switch. She's either the carer to be the good carer and forget about anything and do the job, and then she goes back to the daughter role. And this is also going back to the other question of the contrast, another contrasting thing that she has to face, which makes the character much deeper also, I think.
And I wonder if you could just say a word about kind of the role of the tarot cards and how throughout the film it's sort of looking for meaning, and she finds her different channels to try and make sense of the situation. Why does this happen to somebody? Why you can go from, like the skier, like doing the treacherous things, and then suddenly, become almost, incapacitated or, not able to do anything for yourself.
These are big questions, and I'm just a filmmaker. I'm not God. I cannot answer. This is life. I think each and everyone knows deep inside their personal journey and where they did wrong to themselves. I mean, the film suggests that this guy ended up incapacitated, as you said, only because he never accepted truly himself. So in a way, when at the beginning of the film, she says the system attacks the system, disease and anything does not come from the skies and hits you like a curse. We are very responsible for what's happening in our lives. And it's a very important thing to to know and to move on with. According to tarot cards, it's very close to what I'm saying, is the fact that she's in such a big angst and she's in such a big need for any answer. Okay, so any medium would work. However, at the end of the day, indeed, we are really responsible for our lives. And the film would like to make this small remark about all of these people that in great angst look for answers everywhere. And people, more logical people, tend to say, oh, they don't know, or they tend to somehow minimize their need. However, they haven't understood that most of these people don't really believe in the tarot cards or in the stars. They only need something that sounds like a proper answer. And this is somehow coincides with the degree of their huge anxiety. And she's in a huge anxiety. I mean, she's in a very big crisis, I guess, throughout the film. But at the end, there's a small resolution.
And ultimately, what do you hope people take away from watching it? And it does feel like perhaps there is, I don't want to say a trend, but more films that are maybe dealing with in a more kind of honest, frank way of people, facing disease, facing, things in later life. I was thinking of Gaspar Noé's Vortex, for example, and there's other films that have been in this vein. So do you feel like your film can almost be seen as part of a wave of, actually tackling these taboo topics on screen?
I don't know. I haven't thought about it before you made this comment. I don't really believe in waves. I mean, what is a wave? So it's a very pleasant thing, and for as a viewer and a filmmaker, to indeed start to watch films that are honest and remind of real life and not portray something that does not exist and you cannot identify, for sure. So if you want this turn towards honesty and simplicity, therefore a turn to substance for me is a very hopeful note.
And yeah, from your film specifically, what do you hope people will leave the cinema feeling?
Yes, it's a very there are various responses. Okay, most of them cry a lot, but it's not a crying of pity. It's a release crying, and I'm very happy about it because the film could easily turn out to be a melodrama and people would cry because he's so sick and she's so sad and they're all so sad. But at the end, the crying that I get as a response is much more good, like peace and loving crying, which I like it. And with the crying, indeed, there are many people that are confused because the film hides. They have questions at the end, which is interesting because this is when I tell them you can watch it again and you can find the answers because everything is there, And what is interesting is that, with the pandemic and the Netflix and all these platforms and series and fast watching, then my film is a slow film in a way. It's not so much dialogue. The pacing is what it is. So it was very interesting to see people wanting to watch it again and not being scared that, okay, how can I watch something super long? And so I get good responses.
And I've already taken up too much of your time, but just very quickly, can you tell us what you might work on next? And also, how do you see the health of the industry right now for female filmmakers? It feels like there's lots and lots of female filmmakers coming through, but there's still maybe, a slight imbalance in the people that we can see that, can tell stories.
Sure. I'm super happy for all filmmakers and particularly for female filmmakers. However, I'm up for good films, no matter where they come from, because I'm a film lover. But for sure, let's say that it's a fact that, yes, we can see globally a change, like there is more attention to us. I hope it's not a trend that it will keep being like this for the years that will follow. And about my next project, what I can say is that it's a film, I have already written it, and currently I'm in discussions with producers. And it's a film about life and death, or life at its very end, without disease this time, though.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for sharing all that with me. Can't wait for everyone else to see Moon 66 Questions at the cinema, and of course to see your future projects. So thanks so much. Lovely to chat to you. Thanks, Jackie. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.